Okay, welcome to the Swish Shoes podcast. This is actually number 18 in our series, and this is a little bit different. We're going to talk about words, the words of 2025, words with new meanings, words that have been overused, words that might have a little bit of interest or a bit of irony about them. And we've each chosen a word, and at the end we may have a discussion and see which is the best. And of course, I'd be interested to get feedback from anyone listening about which words of 2025 they most like. Today we've got, joining me, Bill Young, is Mike Fenn, Sigrid Brendel, Armin Scharlach, and Ciaran Crossin. All have chosen at least one word, and we may come up with a few more as we go through. We'll go straight over to Mike Fenn. Mike, can you kick us off? What's your word of 2025?
Truthiness is the one that I chose. I came up with it spontaneously because I've always been looking for a word that means what it means, which is something that sounds plausible but isn't true. Or it might be true, it might not be true, but the truthiness is what appeals to the segment that is being marketed to. I think this is particularly poignant in today's political climate, especially in the US. From a commercial business point of view, looking back over my career, I've often been struck by managers, I use that word instead of leaders, who will poll until they find something that has the appropriate truthiness for them to manage upwards. So I like truthiness. And I think over my career of 30 years in various countries and businesses, the pendulum has swung from truth to truthiness in the organizations I work through. If we look at the political situation in the world now, I think truthiness trumps truth. In the sense of trump as in cards, where one card beats another. Obviously, I'm not referring to the president.
Top trumps.
Yeah.
Mike, does truthiness have to contain any truth whatsoever, or is it actually always a falsehood?
No, I don't think it is always a falsehood. It's the thing that resonates with the segment. Actually, truth is sort of immaterial. It's the truthiness that matters.
Perception is reality is something that I have learned from a very wise colleague a couple of years ago and had to accept while being a very rational person that it's not always about rationals and facts and figures. It's all about the perception, isn't it?
Well, truthiness is number one, is the first one today. Thank you, Mike. Ciaran, you came up with something a few days back I thought was quite an interesting one. And then I discovered, of course, as soon as I heard it from you, I saw it all over the place.
Well, I'm a man of the moment, aren't I? I'm a man of all seasons. Yes, my word is enshittification. enshittification. Enshittification.
No, the way I saw it spelt was with two T's, so we'll argue about that sometime. No. But carry on.
It's a term that's been coined by a man called Cory Doctorow. He's actually written a book that's recently been released. I've not read the book. I've listened to a number of podcasts where he expounds this theory, but basically it concerns the internet and how we interact nowadays with sort of modern digital commerce. How both, if you think of a transaction as being a buyer and a seller, they've basically become the tunnel in between and they exploit both ends of the transaction. And the means of doing that is by sort of steadily making our internet experience worse, but locking us in further to it. He does give examples of sort of other business practices, which you can sort of see are straight out of the Silicon Valley playbook.
I was fascinated because I thought enshittification just meant making things worse. And then I discovered there's an actual formal definition of it, and it's in 3 stages. Yeah. First, you draw in the customers, the buyers, and then you draw in the sellers to the platform. And as you draw in the sellers, the experience gets worse for the buyers. And then you start to exploit the sellers, and the experience gets worse for them until you end up with the enshittified platform. Yeah. Loved it. Sigrid, you came up with an interesting one.
Yeah.
Completely new to me, I have to say.
Well, it's something, since I know I live south of the Alps, over-tourism is something which is quite popular nowadays. So, and I thought about the analogy of over-tourism to our procurement function. And why? Because over-tourism means that many people go to always the same place. And then they end up paying for that comfort zone of not exploring. And you can translate that. You have too many meetings, everybody to be safe, you invite another one. So you have over-tourism in your meetings. You have over-tourism in your emails. Nobody's accountable anymore. Nobody thinks, actually. And nobody takes decisions because it's comfortable. In over-tourism, you have somebody who is just guiding you and you go with the flow. You don't think. And I think in our world right now, we need to start thinking. We need to start going off the beaten track. We need to avoid the comfort zone. And that's my finish, and that's why I choose it. I think with AI, with agentic, it's all new fields, new playing fields. It's off the beaten track. And I don't see enough people going there. And that's my wishful thinking for 26. Stop over-tourism and go to the places.
I can see you smiling at this one, Armin. You've seen this, haven't you?
There's this fantastic saying that a tourist destroys what he's looking for by finding it. I think it is describing over-tourism in the real world very well. In this analogy, how you have been using it, Sigrid, I'm not sure. And I was actually thinking about to what extent that is applicable here, because I don't think that having too many meetings is destroying something or so. But I'm still thinking about it. So I'm undecided. But what definitely I think is the case is that I understand why people are doing it. And it is because some of you who might have followed these podcasts before have heard I'm a big proclaimer that people are misincentivized in organizations and are way too much incentivized to avoid risk than instead of being really entrepreneurial. And all these over-tourism analogy that you have pointed out is a form of risk avoidance, playing things better safe than being sorry.
Yeah.
What do you think of it, Mike?
Yeah, I agree entirely. In fact, I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine who's just done a bike tour of Kerala and Tamil Nadu. And he was remarking on how much more you see on a bicycle, especially in India, than you do any sort of other type of tour. And it reminded me of the be a traveller, not a tourist. And of course, the thing about being a traveller is you haven't really got an agenda. You follow whatever is the path that works. I, in my career, have seen many, many programs go wrong because everyone thought they could define it from the beginning.
How do you mean, define it from the beginning?
Well, I'm reminded of another quotation about some I came across recently, which is never confuse a clear view with a short path or distance. And just because the CEO can see where they want to get to doesn't mean it's going to be easy to get there, or even that the organization knows how to get there. So this is more like traveling than the tourism. And of course, it's very risky because obviously everyone's going to say it's easy to get there when they add all their projects up.
So this over-tourism thing applied to business, it implies risk avoidance, it implies familiarity, implies convention, not willing to upset people. Yeah.
And something like not challenging the status quo, because everybody goes there. And
Armin.
My word of the year is probably the least inspiring one from all the other great ones that we discussed so far, but one which I personally believe has really determined a lot of what has happened this year, and it's tariff. I'm not sure to what extent we had in recent years tariffs really on our agenda. It was more about free trade. And tariffs always were in existence, but were they really that relevant? And then this year we have simply seen how they can be weaponized and being used in a harmful way. And I'm not going to comment much further on the current American president and how they are using it, but I think it is definitely something that has impacted everyone's business life this year so much that would be my candidate for the word of the year.
Yeah, if you get to my age and you've studied a little bit of economics at times, you see so many countries that have gone for tariffs and gone belly up as a result. It's just amazing to me that it's going around again.
Well, we all know that what turned the 1929 depression into the Great Depression was the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act.
It didn't help, did it?
It made matters much, much worse, as anyone who's watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off knows.
Is that a recommendation from you to watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
Always highly recommended.
Any thoughts? I'm going to come in with my word in a second, or I might give you a choice of words from me. But any thoughts on anything we've had so far? No, I'll come in then. My word of 2025, my proposal, I had two actually. They're not as good as anything I've heard so far. One was performative. Now, it's been around for a couple of years, but it's suddenly become quite popular. And basically, performative means being seen to do something or pretending to do something. I didn't choose that one eventually. I chose agentic because it's come in so much in terms of AI and the idea of having agentic AI. And the whole thing about agency seemed to me to be coming up again. I think we've forgotten about a thing called the principal agent problem. And the principal agent problem is when the principal is the owner of a business and the agent is the person that they have appointed to look after it for them. The principal in the modern world is the shareholder, unless it's a family firm. And the agent is everyone that works for it, from the CEO downwards. And the principal agent problem is that the agent tends to look after their own interests. The agent is always looking for higher returns for themselves, and it will only look after the principal insofar as it benefits themselves. And I think it's an issue with agentic AI that you can expect the AI to start looking after itself. We're finding this already in many, many cases where not only does the AI learn to tell lies in order to deliver what it is programmed to deliver, but it actually gets better and better at telling lies, and it learns to lie. And I think that we need to wake up to this agentic thing and where it's taking us. And people use the word agentic as if this is the inevitable next step in their AI journey, and as if it is inevitably and unavoidably a good thing. So that's my suggested word for 2025 is agentic.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think they probably already learned truthiness.
Yes, I think they have. Yeah,
If you look
especially
at
the
the
way they
sycophancy,
flatter every
yeah.
user.
Exactly.
Well,
Armin, you were going to come in on that one as well.
I like the term and then your explanation, because it demonstrates to me that at the moment, fortunately, most of these artificial intelligence solutions are not really intelligent yet. Because in game theory, it's very logical what you described in the beginning with the principal agent model is when you have rational players that everyone is trying to get the best out for themselves in a game. It's the only reason why the agentic AI is eventually not doing that to a full extent yet is because it is not that intelligent yet. But it definitely is something that will be very interesting to see how things are going to develop in the near future.
Yeah.
well,
Any other words that people thought of that I know
have
one.
I have a
Yep.
comment, Bill, on this one. You mentioned something that, and Armin did that as well, that an agent or that companies are, everyone tries to do that for their own benefit. That's actually when company culture goes wrong. I was thinking that where you actually advance, where you make, where growth in a company really comes from, is when the culture is aligned to the business, not to the personal incentives. At least that's my experience. So I would say that I wouldn't agree that the agents is always something that you look after your individual. It can happen. And when it happens, it's certainly not good for the development of the company.
Yeah.
So I would say there is an element of culture which we should think about in agent. How does it fit? And to that extent, I think there's a big discrepancy between smaller companies and corporates. Because what I see is that there is more agentic agility in smaller corporations.
That would be an interesting full podcast because I would love to have the time to disagree with everything you've said. Because I see exactly what you're saying. I agree with the principles of what you're saying, but I think that we've ignored the fact that everyone is incentivized to act as a dishonorable agent, and that if the culture can correct that, that's a good thing, but you mustn't rely on people always acting honorably. So, but that's another podcast, I would say.
Game theory actually tells us that people are, in the end, always looking after their own interest. But the limitation is, and I think this is what then makes organizations working fine, is that if you are becoming overly selfish, the negative consequences for the organizations will also again hurt you in a following round. This is what keeps people working in a certain direction that is often named the corporate culture. But in the end, it is just the common denominator of all these selfish interests of all the players in the organization. You rarely find an organization that is performing better just because people are altruistic. It would be lovely if that would be the case, and there might be a few exceptions, but generally that's not how humans are working.
Mike, you were going to say something?
You were saying that would be an interesting podcast to have. My mind went back to AI here and alignment. I mean, this is what you're talking about. Are the agents and the principles aligned? And one of the things that AI people worry about a lot is that the alignment is only apparent. And what the training of the AI has done is made an alignment that is a proxy for what the goal is, but it isn't exactly that. And when the environment gets outside of the parameters within which it was trained, unexpected things happen because the AI was actually working to a different goal. So I think a wider podcast could be around alignment, and it could include principal agent. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah, that's a good one. The other words that we've tossed around, just to see what people think of them. AI slop, the stuff that's coming out of AI that is pretty meaningless, but I guess its truthiness comes into that a little bit, doesn't it? It looks superficially attractive, and then you realize it hasn't said anything. That's AI slop.
Absolutely. And I was initially thinking about it, but then chose Terrace instead. Now, the AI slop, I think, has two consequences. It can be a pretty harmless thing if it is more for entertainment purposes, but consuming too much of it is what then often is referred to another very nice 2025 word, which is brain rot. So it has consequences on people's brain and psychology, but it also can be weaponized. And this is why the truthiness comes in. There are plenty of historic documentaries on YouTube these days, which have been generated by AI, which look very interesting and nice, but they are very often the outcome of mass-produced AI videos with a lot of false information in there. And no one really understands, I think, at the moment what is happening if other AIs are using this information as their truth, and how things are going to get into a vicious cycle from all the AI slop that is generated and further used by other AI agents and by humans. Dangerous times we're in that regards.
I think what will happen, and I think has probably already happened with some versions of AI, is they're date limited. So the AI is not allowed to train itself on any information from before a certain date, I think in 2021, because I think the number of gigabytes of slop that's sitting on servers burning heat around the world is now getting to the point where it probably exceeds the number of gigabytes of useful information or funny videos about cats that people like that you might actually want to find. So it becomes a vicious cycle in that the more slop that the AI generates, the more slop it's going to generate in the future. And then it becomes the helpful little robot that always gets things wrong.
You mentioned YouTube videos as an example of AI slop. I did go through a phase of listening to YouTube videos or watching them on history. And it took me a while to realize that the whole thing could have been generated, including the images, the voice, the text, everything could have been generated by AI, and probably was. Then I also noticed there are major howlers that come in, and they're delivered in exactly the same deadpan voice as factual information it's picked up from elsewhere. I find that very worrying.
Fortunately, us humans are still pretty good at detecting when a picture is not right, when emotion's not right, when a voice is synthetic, when we hear it through the open air. But it is, I mean, some of them are getting much, much better.
If you compare to 1 year or 1.5 years ago, I mean, picture is very, very different. It is getting more tricky to identify what is real and what is not.
Yeah, but it comes in the fine detail of 3 fingers or 6 fingers and things like that. Humans are still good at that.
Now, video is the most challenging application, but when you're looking for a recipe on the internet, there are very high chances that you are actually going to prepare something in the kitchen that is AI slop, because it has been artificially generated, and there is no guarantee whatsoever that what you're going to cook is really going to work out fine. Yeah.
Hope it doesn't taste like slop.
If anybody is looking for recipes, I found a good technique is to put BBC in the search, because BBC never has all these pages about how they learned this recipe from their granny and how they always used to celebrate it at Easter. And it goes on and on and on and on about a family history before it ever gets down to the recipe, whereas the BBC recipes don't include that. And I've got the impression that maybe all the rest of it is slop. Well, before we have a quick roundup of the words and to see if there's anything that stands out, there's one other word that everybody kept mentioning when there were ideas for today coming up. Broligarchy. Is that how you would pronounce it? Or broligarchy? Control by the tech bros. We all know, the meetings in the White House with Trump and Zuckerberg and the rest. That's a fairly recent thing, and it's a pretty horrible phenomenon. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. And it feeds over to sort of my word of the year, which is shitification.
Yes.
Because broligarchy, or the broligarchy, whatever way you want to call it, they're almost like the original titans of industry, I think they were known as, at the turn of the 20th century in the United States. So Vanderbilt, J.D. Rockefeller, Ford, and some of those other people who ran monopolistic organizations. They were such great capitalists, they didn't want any competition. That's how good at being capitalists they were. But they wanted to maintain monopolies. And then I think it was Teddy Roosevelt brought in the Federal Trade Commission, and they went trust busting.
There's a podcast in there as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Right. So we got truthiness and shitification, over-tourism, tariffs, agentic, also mentioned performative, brain rot, broligarchy. Any thoughts on any of those? Which stands out to anybody? What would you vote for?
I'm just going to say, obviously I can't choose my own word, but before the rest of you begin to make a choice, think about, part of this is about raising awareness. If something is not done about shitification on the internet, you're going to find things like when you go to turn on your car, even though you've bought the car, you own the car, you've fueled it, you've got a battery in it, or you've charged it with electricity, you'll have to pay a subscription service, because that new service has now been downloaded to your vehicle. So for you to drive the car, you'll have to pay a subscription service to whomever. I think things like that are already happening in the car industry, where to fully access either the horsepower or the acceleration on the vehicle, you have to pay an added monthly subscription to the car manufacturer, and that's controlled through the engine management system over the internet. So unless something's done about it, unless we raise awareness and unless something's done about it, that's going to be the future for us all. So I'm not trying to twist your arms into voting for the word, but I'm just saying.
That is a brilliant insight, because one thinks of shitification as being to do with web platforms, but then you suddenly realize that when you buy anything, there is almost always a pay-as-you-go service attached, after-sales service. And
why is the ink that I have to buy for my printer, why is that like $10,000 a gallon? Because it comes in a little ink cartridge that has an RFID on it that speaks to the software in the printer that says, I'm an original Canon or Hewlett Packard printer cartridge. Why can that not be jailbroken? You've got your iPhone. This is the greatest example of it. Because once something's on an iPhone, basically it's no longer yours. It belongs to Apple, because you'll never properly get it out. It's got a much wider term than just the exploitation between people and advertisers on the internet on certain platforms. It's about moving everything towards a subscription service. Everything eventually goes behind a paywall. Can you imagine like Netflix, or their original business model was subscribe to us, you can get all these movies and they're ad free. Then once they've got enough subscribers, it's you can subscribe to us to get all these movies, but now we're going to have to put ads on them. But if you want the movie without the ads, you can buy a premium subscription service. I can see in the future, because I like a certain type of movie, I'll end up with my own personalized extra premium subscription service, where the types of movies that I've consistently shown Netflix that I like to watch, so romantic comedies, things like that, they'll end up behind this paywall.
Right. I'm going to go to everyone else and get, I'm going to go to Mike next and get, but I think that's a brilliant exposition on shitification.
But I was going to say truthiness, that strikes a chord with me, because it also kind of feeds into I think, disinformation. If there's a kernel of truth surrounded by a load of lies, it gives it more credence.
Right. Well, on truthiness, we'll go to Mike.
I don't think that all the acidification things that has been so well described there would have occurred if there was sufficient competition. So it's all about getting an oligarchy, and that's the oligarchy in the tech world is the oligarchy of bros. And you'll see that Trump today signed an executive order preventing states from making laws about AI. Once you get these magnificent seven, or whatever you want to call them, running the whole thing, then you are completely at the mercy. Now, going back to the SIM card in your car or whatever it is, if the Chinese don't play that game, then people won't buy the cars that do. But if you've got an oligarchy or a broligarchy, then you've got no choice because they'll all do the same thing. So I'll go for broligarchy if I can't go for truthiness.
You can have both. Sigrid, what's yours?
Yeah, if I listen to you guys, this is all gloomy. We're going down the drain. And I think we cannot end the year on such a kind of a dark side of business, to be fair, and to give our teams a view on it. I think it's important to understand that there is risk and that we should be aware and try to fight in our own words and be mindful of the truthiness, be mindful of enshittification, maybe take some personal decisions, but let's make sure that we as humans have still relationships. We can still decide what we want to bring in and what not. And so I don't have a specific, I cannot decide between the ones here because I'm missing the person. The more we talk about, we talk all about tools, we talk about the impact of systems, of tools, of digital. But we as humans, we should still be in control. So maybe the truthiness is the one which comes closest to what I'm feeling right now listening to you guys, that we should stay true to ourselves and defend what we have in terms of relationships and make the tools work for us and not the other way around.
Thanks, Sigrid. And Armin.
I very much like what you said, Sigrid. And when I was reflecting on the different terms and what we discussed about them, it got clear to me that they are talking about different parts of our words. Some are more business related, some are more personal related, some are more on the meta level. And this is why I think it is perfectly fine having several of these words really describing what 2025 was all about. What I also was thinking is are we having more of these words because there is more happening in just 1 year than it used to be in the past? Or is it just my personal impression? I have the impression that times have sped up significantly, and the rich variety of great words that we discussed here in the past would have eventually been candidates for the words of a decade, but not the words of a year. And this will make me very much interested to see how we are going to have the discussion in 12 months from now. And I'm very much looking forward to that.
Thanks, Armin. I'm not sure which one I'd go for, but I'd heard all of the word over the last day or two, over the last months previously, and had a chance to think about them. I was not expecting to hear over-tourism. Now, I think it's an ugly word. It's not an easy word it doesn't immediately apply to business, but it does somehow or other strike a chord with me, because the way in which tourists follow each other onto a cruise ship and go to the same places and despoil the same beaches, and then the empties in the evening when they all go away on the same cruise ship, that does ring true. And the way business operates as well, where everybody feels safe following what everyone else is doing. The way in which you conduct meetings. And, people talk about best practice, and what they really mean is doing what everybody else is doing. And that's what the result of best practice is. It is business over tourism. It's the one that made me think most today. But that's not really fair, is it? Because I'd heard all the others just, over the last weeks and months.
I think we missed one out that was sort of bandied about in the chat a bit. I don't want to depress Sigrid any further, but that was rage bait.
Yeah,
but then that also goes to basically monetizing the internet. You create outrage, you get more clicks.
Mike is smiling.
I asked you earlier, didn't I, Bill, if I could have a phrase rather than a word, and I was not allowed to. But my phrase would be "race to the bottom of the brainstem," which is what the internet is about now, and AI algorithms make it worse. Is to just monopolize your attention and get you a little hit of dopamine every time you scroll on.
Mm-hmm.
Oh dear, Sigrid, we really have.
Oh no, sorry, have I depressed
raised to the bottom of depressed you.
I have the blue in background, so
Is there any positive word that we would allocate to 2025? I'm thinking hard since you said that, Sigrid, but I have not really found one yet. But hopefully we are still getting one. Maybe some of our listeners are having a more positive candidate to offer, and please put them into the comments.
Right. Oh, well, there'll be a chance to comment.
My positive one would be obituary and the long list of people who I hope to read about.
What a good point to finish on. Thank you, Mike Fenn, Sigrid Brendel, Armin, Scharlach, and Ciaran Crossin for joining me, Bill Young, today in the 18th episode of the Swishoes podcast. And we even came up with some ideas for future podcasts. So thanks to you all, and goodbye.
Thank you.